Hey everyone, it's Aaron here from Rudy Visuals. Hope everyone is doing well. In today's video, we're talking all about our new video camera. It is the one, the only, the Sony FX6. So this video is not going to be like a full-on review because honestly there are so many amazingly in-depth reviews of this camera at this point, there's really no point. Instead I want to talk about a bit of my first impressions of the FX6 based on my real-world experience of using this both for personal and work projects for the first 2 months. So just a first impressions video. So for context, my main camera prior to this was a Sony a7S III. It's still an amazing camera, I'm using it right now, everyone knows really what it is capable of. But some of the main issues I was having with it was kind of like the battery life for longer shoots, having to fiddle with like a variable ND filter because I do a lot of outdoor filming, and the lack of modularity, also being limited to 3.5mm microphones as well. These days I shoot on slightly larger scale projects, typically with working with one or two colleagues, which usually means more gear is needed. So I need a monitor, I need 2 sets of mics, I need wireless transmitter, and while you can man all of these things on an a7S III with a cage, you're still kind of limited because of its size and port limitations, whereas the FX6 being like a focused video camera kind of basically fixes all of those problems that I was having. The FX6 in terms of the image sensor at least is very similar to that of the a7S III. It's essentially like a souped up a7S III but in a cinema camera body. So if this was like a Pokemon, it'd be like the final evolution form of the a7S III. Wow! So a big incentive for wanting to get a camera like this was just I wanted a proper focused video camera rather than like a hybrid mirrorless camera. And I had a budget of around about £5,000–6,000 been saving for a very, very long time. So I considered cameras like the Red Komodo, the Canon C70, the smaller FX3, one of the Ursa Mini Pro models, but ultimately I chose this because it just kind of just made sense. I really know how to use Sony cameras. I'm already invested in the ecosystem with all the E-mount lenses I already own, and the fact that the S3 is so similar, the video matches up really well if I use the S3 as like a B cam. It's also great to see that the FX6 is also on the Netflix approved list of cameras, which the a7S III sadly isn't. Now I do get that 6K is a ridiculous amount of money to spend on a camera. It is literally now the most expensive thing that I own besides my car. But really a camera like this is it's kind of like an investment in yourself. I know that with the kinds of clients I've got and some of the work projects coming up that I'll be able to recoup that fairly quickly, and that it's going to provide them with a higher quality product as well as make my day job projects easier and higher quality as well. One of the biggest selling points for me though was the built-in electronic variable ND filter. This is such a clutch and amazing feature to have. You can just set the f-stops manually or set it to auto and it will smoothly transition the ND filter to give you the best exposure. So I can literally shoot on the brightest of days and not completely blow out my highlights. Like I literally never have to worry about exposure because of this feature. It's such a huge luxury, and for me personally that was worth spending the money just that alone. It's also got things like time coding, so it's super easy to sync up the video and audio in post, and also things like SDI ports, which is a really nice upgrade over HDMI. It's more of a professional level connection. The sensor itself is a 10.2 megapixel XMOR RCMOS sensor with up to 15 stops of dynamic range using the S-Log3. And one thing that really just stands out is just how well this camera retains details across, like highlights and shadows compared to something like the a7S III or the a7 III I had before that. A shot like this in the woods is really complex for cameras to capture because there is just so much range between the darkest part of the image and the brightest. And as you can see here, it does such a great job of retaining all those details. This is like straight out of camera with no color grading. I think this is in S-Cinetone, so I'm not even using S-Log3 where I would get the most dynamic range, and it still looks this good. So these are the kinds of image quality benefits you're going to get when jumping from like a hybrid mirrorless to a video focused camera. In terms of video resolution, you're looking at up to 4K video, up to 120 frames per second, all in 10-bit 42 with up to 16-bit raw video via an external recorder in ProRes. There's also the internal XAVC-I and XAVC-L, which gives you some different options in terms of whether you want max image quality, or if you want a huge file size that's a little bit easier to edit, or if you want to bump down to 1080 to save on some space as well. So a bit of options there for you. It also has amazingly reliable and fast autofocus with real-time IAF and face tracking. Got touch to focus, lots of options to tweak the AF settings depending on what kind of video I'm shooting. Not to mention amazing low light performance capabilities with its ISO range of 320 up to 409,600. This video here was shot in fairly low light, but all in AF, and it literally just stuck focus on the eye the entire time. And when she turned or moved, it maybe lost her for a half a second or so, but then it just snapped right back. And I know for a fact that I could never ever pull focus manually this fast. I've also shot a ton of interview style videos with this for work, and I know that once I've dialed in the settings, it's just gonna stick onto that face no matter what. Of course, another major advantage of the FX6 is just the modularity you get with a body like this. You're able to really build this thing out, or even strip it down depending on your specific needs. You can go from crazy builds like this one with an easy rig on a gimbal. You can go handheld, get it on like a shoulder rig. You can really tailor it to suit the situation. And even if it's just right out of the box, you can still move the monitor around. You can change the side handle. There's the dual XLR inputs via the handle. It's just super modular. And of course that dual CI Express or Type A compatible media slots for maximum ultimate safety. You can record on both at the same time, or you can separate them for more space. And while the FX6 doesn't have IS built into the body, it also captures gyroscope data, so you can actually use Sony's Catalyst Browse software to stabilize your video in post. And the results look pretty good, honestly, at least for like kind of still and panning shots. It's like using like a much better version of Warp Stabilizer. Not that anyone uses Premiere Pro anymore. Now for balance, there are some flaws with this camera that I do want to go over. Firstly, the price is a pretty big hurdle. It's not really an accessible camera for most people, let's be real. I'm also not a fan of the stock monitor. It's just a little bit too small to be really all that useful for big projects. An additional monitor is definitely a must in my opinion. You also have zero audio, which is probably the biggest flaw, without the top handle attached. So without this handle, you have no sound whatsoever. The built-in microphone in this camera is absolute trash. You do not want to use that. So if you do want audio without that top handle, you're gonna have to capture it externally using your external recorder. Personally, I think it would have been nice to have included like a 3.5mm audio jack on the main body somewhere. I think that would have been a nice option to have, but it's missing that as well. I also think that the actual menu and UI system is not really all that intuitive for like a beginner. A colleague of mine at work who mainly works with mirrorless Panasonic cameras found the FX6 really hard to understand, especially using like the Cine EI mode. So there is definitely a bit of a learning curve. You're gonna have to watch some videos to really understand how to use this camera properly. That being said, ultimately, I think that the visual quality just speaks for itself. I think the term cinema line, you think cinema cameras, I think that's a little bit misleading. No one's really shooting like high-end Hollywood movies with this, but I think about stuff just underneath that, like short films, ads, documentaries, interviews. So if you're thinking of getting a camera like this for yourself, you just need to ask yourself what your need is, your budget, and what you realistically expect to get in return as well. If you're just making YouTube videos or vlogs, that kind of thing, then obviously the FX6 isn't really designed for you. I mean, you could use this for YouTube. There are some people who do use this for YouTube, but it's a little bit overkill. You don't really need me to tell you that. But I think if you're someone who is already like an existing filmmaker working in the industry, or for like a company or organization like myself using hybrid mirrorless style cameras, and you're looking to take that next step and you're starting to feel constrained by your existing camera the way I was with the A7S3, then I think that's exactly who the FX6 is for. It is going to come with that initial investment, that kind of steepish learning curve, but once you get over that, it's going to set you up, I think, video wise for probably the next 5, 6, 7 years. Honestly, it's a camera that's going to make you money and create really high-end video projects. So those are my initial thoughts of this camera, my first impressions, but let me know what you guys think. Is anyone out there using this camera, or are you using a similar cinema line video camera, or are you still using hybrid mirrorless cameras? I think probably most of you still are, but let me know down there in the comment section below if you've got any questions or anything like that. And if you found this video helpful, then do me a big favor, give it a like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff that the YouTube gods of algorithms like. Follow us on socials, and I guess I'll see you on the next one. Peace.